Hello, my friends. Welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is Valerie. And yeah, you're not crazy. This is a podcast that is dropping in the middle of the week. This is an extra bonus episode. And so you have to know, a little secret is if ever these bonus episodes pop up, it's generally because I've had a lot on my mind and I couldn't resist sharing with you. So here we are. This episode actually comes to you as a result of some deep thoughts I was having over the weekend. I was asking myself some kind of, existential questions about the work that I do, about some of the changes that have happened in my life, in my family's life. And is it just me, or every once in a while do you kind of look in the mirror and go, is this like, am I doing, like, is this good? Like, is this the very best way I can like fulfill the measure of my creation? Is this meaningful? I think sometimes on harder days, it's like, is this worth it? I may or may not have thought that a few times. And so that's kind of what was sort of rolling around in my mind when some thoughts emerged about the value of what I'm doing. And maybe this is just something that I need to share with you as my witnesses. But I am so connected to, I feel like there's such an importance in not only the transformative journey, but the witnessing of it, and having loved ones and friends and people around us who we share our stories with. And so this is, I guess, part of that. It's also goes hand in hand with a new kind of vulnerable direction that I've decided to take this platform in. You all know, or maybe many of you know, that I have decided to actually expand my reach just a little bit by offering something that I'm calling the Life Fellowship. And a part of my existential questions had to do with that, because honestly, I wasn't really I wasn't looking to do something else. And yet when this idea sort of was downloaded to me, it felt like it was the right thing to do. And so I moved forward on it, and then I began to ask questions later, right? And I think that's sometimes what we do when we are sort of people that move by intuition and gut, is we do what the gut or the intuition or the soul directs us to do. And then afterwards we pause and go, wait, what's going on here? And so that is why I'm here with you today. Is I just kind of wanted to share with you what sort of came to me over the weekend as I was thinking about some of these big questions. One thing that comes to me in terms of maybe it's just my taking a step back and pondering bigger questions. Like sometimes I think we get so kind of consumed with the everyday schedule and what am I doing tomorrow and what are my plans? And, for me, it'd be like, what are the needs of my family? What groups am I running? What individuals or couples do I see? And so you kind of stay in the granular. And so this weekend was an opportunity for me to shift my focus and move to the more big picture. And some of the reading that I've done that many of you who follow me has a lot to do with not only the growth of the human soul, but also the growth of our civilization and our culture and our society itself. And I think this is an extra interesting topic to be thinking about right now because of so much that's going on. Something that's been occurring to me as I'm trying to make meaning of my own work and my connection with you is that there's a growing number of developmental theorists and cultural philosophers who are actually contending that our culture is actually moving towards a new awakening of consciousness, and that there is a small but emerging and growing number of people who are awakening or are going through this new wave or this new awakening in their own lives, in their own journeys. And I'm so interested in this because it also may seem arguable, or maybe even more arguable, that the exact opposite is happening. Not that some awakening of consciousness is happening, but maybe in some ways it may feel like it's actually as if something is actually falling apart, right? That things are spiraling out of control, not spiraling upwards towards greater light and truth. So If you thought about this or bought into this idea that a wave of awakening is happening, you might expect to see less polarization, less issues with large institutions like the LDS Church, or maybe even more prominently right now, the United States of America. You might actually expect to see more synthesis or more peace, more connection. But we see fragmentation. We see radical issues, chaos, breakdown. So you could argue that, well, there's no way evolution is happening because all of these bad things are happening. But what a lot of the philosophers that contend that we are in a space of growth, what they're saying is that we are witnessing in real time the very typical tension or the actual labor pains of a new emerging consciousness. Meaning that whenever a culture or a family or an individual is on the cusp of growth, that is when their system, their body, or the collective is going to experience the most tension, the most struggle. And I guess to me that's meaningful, because I am certainly not only trying to make meaning of my own life, but I'm trying to make meaning of what's going on around me as I watch the news and see the crisis going on. And so we can look at this just simply as chaos and disorder, or we can recognize larger cycles of all existence, and the cycles of the universe are consistently that the world and all of everything, everyone, every system, every human, every church, every country, every political ideology moves in this wave of birth and then death and then rebirth. And I've talked a lot about this in my group. So if you're one of my groupies, you're familiar with this. I want to use a couple different words though. That growth and evolution moves from something called a thesis, a working thesis, and then it dips down into antithesis, and then it rises up into something called synthesis. And so to slow that down just a little bit, a thesis is the original idea. You could think of, in the LDS parlance, the thesis is the first vision and the very beginnings of the LDS Church. The thesis in the United States of America is sort of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence and these ideas around which the country was formed. And so the thesis is the original position. This is what we are. This is what we stand for. These things are not static. They're not supposed to be static. And so inevitably, as something develops, there will enter in an antithesis or an opposition. Something that was created as part of the thesis is proven wrong. Someone will come forward with a contradiction to one of the founding ideas and say, hey, that doesn't quite work. We tried that. This is the order of the universe, my friends, that we move in every realm of reality, from thesis to antithesis, and then to synthesis, which means that we move, we don't just stay in antithesis or this opposition or contradicting, posing the viewpoint that sort of pokes holes in the original thesis. We need that, but we move from antithesis then into synthesis, which is the temporary resolution. It's a reconciliation of the conflict between the original thesis and the opposing antithesis. And so synthesis is where we look at the entire big picture and say they both matter. And here is accumulation of the importance of the first idea and the wisdom we learned from the opposing view. And then now we've come up with a third way, or something that is transcendent of both. But it includes the importance of both as part of the process of discovery. And the beautiful thing about this process, my friends, is that the synthesis is also in and of itself temporary, because inevitably the synthesis will start to become the accepted norm. It'll be considered the fact, or the ideal position. And inevitably, guess what happens? You betcha, somebody will come forward and they will say, but what about this? And then the cycle starts over again. So you might be asking yourself, why is she saying this? What is she talking about? Okay, so this is the deal. As cultures unfold, whether it be a country or a church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for our purposes, who does the work of shaking things up? Who does the work of challenging that original idea? If this needs to happen for light and truth to unfold, then the ones who do the shaking up are the people inside of the institutions who themselves are on the leading edge of psychological development. It's the people that are on that faith journey. It's those of us who have had a crisis of faith and have noticed the problems, have noticed the inconsistencies. We're the ones who are actually on that leading edge of development, offering a deeper, broader, more honest conversation about the original idea. Okay, so we have a role that we are playing. The next question I would ask you is this: how do these people who bring about this opposition or the contradictions, they're the ones poking the holes in the original idea or the original history or theology. So we create this space of antithesis. We're the ones that are agitating for growth. However, to stay in agitation is not in and of itself where the healing happens. To stay in agitation is in and of itself a vortex that arguably is potentially not productive at all. My question to you is, how does a person, or how do people move through antithesis and achieve synthesis? Meaning, how do you move out of mere contradiction and opposition and become this force for ultimate growth that combines the importance and the necessity of the original idea with the importance of all of the deep, rich questions and doubts that come when the original idea doesn't turn out to be the final and ultimate answer to all of the questions? And my answer to you is the way we are able to actually achieve this kind of productive evolution of greater light and truth, the way we're able to achieve this transcendence, and also, the way to include transcendence, but also including the lower parts, is that we need to figure out ways to make sense of the big picture so that we don't get stuck in opposition. And we do this, I think, most effectively by creating side communities with the purpose and intent, like the intentional desire to achieve growth and healing, not only for ourselves in the short run, but for our communities in the long run. And what I mean by that is this could be evolution and sort of an upward spiraling of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints eventually. That would be a best case scenario. But if we are interested in participating in cultural evolution and growth, it also can mean that we are bringing about long-term healing for our own communities too, our partners, our children, our families, and those with whom we have connection in our larger lives. And so it is because of this that I realized I was wanting to expand my reach to help our Latter-day Saint seeker community find one another. We need community to achieve something more than just the dissonance of a faith crisis. We need one another to support one another's journeys so that we don't just stay in this place of opposition or grief or antithesis, to sort of stay with my metaphor here. There's precedence for this, okay? So I want you to just, if you are a listener, you don't even have to be a longtime listener of the podcast. If you're even just a listener in the last 6 months or so, I want to take you back to episodes 375 and 377. It's where I was visiting with a fine gentleman, a good friend of mine named Casey McFarlane, and we were talking about the early church. Okay, so go back if you want to the titles of 375 and 377 are When God Refuses to Be Church Correlated, and When One's Soul Has the Audacity to Grow Right There in Church. Okay, so I want to introduce you to this concept of these side communities, these little think tanks of people on the leading edge of development in their communities who choose, maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally, but they choose to lead out and be the productive agitators for the evolution of their communities. Okay, so back in the 2nd century, okay, so we've got the very, very, very early Christian gathering people. I'm not even going to call it a church yet, because I don't really think they were informally a church, but this is before the Catholic Church really sort of came to be. You had very, very passionate followers of Jesus Christ and his mission and message. Okay. Valentinus is a gentleman who I absolutely love him. That's why I wanted to bring him up, to sort of show you that like this is happening all of the time in cultural evolution, but it's happened in Christianity itself. And I just so happen to selfishly like this story because, Valentinus and Valerie. So it's almost like in some ways I see myself as sort of like his little follower. So he was somebody who went to the Christian, or this early sort of pre-Christian church, and he felt a longing for deeper connection. He saw the value of the church, but he also was kind of moving beyond some of the unfolding requirements of what outside authorities were saying one needed to do to be accepted by Jesus, right? So the church was speaking on Jesus's behalf. And so Valentinus had this intuition, because human intuition is the same yesterday and today and forever, right? Is that back even then, I think he had this deep longing to follow Jesus, but then he started noticing that there was something missing there. And so I'm going to sort of extrapolate a few things, because I think this is a logical conclusion. He started talking to some people who were having the same experience right there inside of the church. And they decided that they would start gathering separately outside of the church meetings and start talking about what were their inner, what was stirring inside of each of them. And he effectively started this side community where he said, even, you know what, there's a place for what is happening in the church. And there's a value to this external authority. What he inevitably had to be teaching or talking about here was that in one's level of development, depending on where they are, that might be very useful and helpful. But that isn't the final answer. That isn't the end game. He wanted to provide a place for people to be able to explore what was happening inside of them as they were spiritually growing and evolving, noticing that these questions sometimes brought up a lot of anxiety. And so he even said, listen, you do you. If you want to attend the worship services, participate in the sacraments, read the same scriptures, that's totally fine. We are still believers in Jesus. We are still Christian. But he, in his side communities, offered a space to really, really look at something that was happening in all of the people that chose to come to this side space. Okay, so they were having direct experience with the divine themselves. And what he wanted people to feel like they were welcome to do was to explore these things and come to recognize what, throughout time, human beings that move to this place of their development, what they find is that I am divine and I have God within me. And so these side communities were places of awakening. They were places of sharing what people were thinking and feeling. They were not about dogma. They were not about a literal interpretation of scriptures. They were about offering people a place to make meaning of what they were hearing at church. In other words, they may hear something at church about, say, for example, the literal creation of Adam and Eve. And they would take that and go, I don't think this is literal. I think this is figurative. And they would see their own life in the creation narrative. And they would metaphorically look at their own journeys in the context of what they were hearing was almost in some ways demanded that they sort of interpret according to the leadership. And they're like, no, sorry, you don't get to interpret my spiritual experience. So in essence, these people were finding spiritual autonomy, and they were gaining the confidence to do so because they were in the context of other seekers. These side communities were actually helping them gain the confidence to be able to trust in their own inner divine. Also, something fascinating about these seeker communities is they sort of resisted or even rejected some of the things that they told they had to believe. These seeker communities on the side that Valentinus created they were very, very interesting in integrating a feminine divine. They pushed back against institutional patriarchy. They just said, no, we don't like it. They gave women leadership roles in ritual and teaching. They emphasized equality and mutuality. And the reason why is this: in one's further development spiritually, one sees the problems with some of these sort of artificially constructed systems. They say, no, that's a system that doesn't have anything to do with God. As human beings evolve and grow, we start to recognize some of these human-made constructions, especially power hierarchy. And a part of later evolution is the flattening of these power hierarchies and embracing a growth hierarchy in the service of one's own experience, meaning that we recognize that each and every one of us is capable of awakening and growing, especially if we have a fertile environment, an environment that invites us to be self-exploring, an environment that helps us recognize that what we're experiencing is good. So as these side communities became more and more apparent, some of the leadership, especially during that day, Irenaeus was one of the main bishops of this era, and he had a big problem with this and found this very, very threatening. So as I pause for a second, I want to just ask you this question. I was thinking about this as I was, having my deep thoughts over the weekend. When institutions retrench, sometimes seekers like ourselves come together. But I actually don't think that's the order of operations. What I think is the order of operations, if I were to sort of take a step back and look at this as a cultural phenomenon, what I believe is actually happening is when seekers like us gather, that's when institutions retrench. Now, if we were to take a pause and think about what has been going on in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the last several years, we are seeing how much influence and let me say this differently. We are seeing that because we live in this information age where people can get on the internet and talk to one another and connect and join some of these like Facebook groups or online communities, that they are gathering confidence and power because they're recognizing that they're not alone. It's even more significant to notice that the target has moved from intellectuals and scholars to the mental health workers. There's a reason for that. What we as mental health workers are doing is we are actually encouraging and inviting psychological maturity and independent thought. We are encouraging you to go within and find God. This doesn't actually need to be a threat to the church, by the way. Many of us, myself included, have changed our theology around God significantly, and yet I still really, really like to gather and commune with other people that are on the same journey. But therapists, we are offering an intentional environment for people to psychologically and spiritually grow and evolve, to differentiate, to transfer our authority from external sources to internal sources. And that always has been, and maybe always will be, a threat to institutional authority figures. What they don't understand is we as side communities are actually, I see us actually as harbingers of theological evolution. I see us as coming together almost like laboratories of expanding consciousness, that we are taking the goodness, all of the things that sort of set us on our path in our early stage Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, primary and youth teachings, or even teachings that still worked for us in our younger adult years. We're taking those things and we're pushing them into the laboratory of deeper thought, of questions, of doubts. We're taking what we've learned and integrating it into our more complex thinking skills. I think we, as side community people, we are the place. We are the first place in these small groups where the seeds of expanding consciousness are born. I'm mixing my metaphors here. But that's where the seeds are planted, is in you and me, as we have these conversations, as we come to embrace not just the goodness of what we're doing, but the really powerful, sacred nature of what we are doing in these laboratories of expanding consciousness. As we come together in side communities, and as Valentinus and his people came together in their side communities in the 2nd century BC, right after, Christianity even became a thing, these are the cohorts of people who are at their spiritual leading edge. And this is a leading edge that happens not just in spiritual communities, but if you're thinking about when the seeds of evolution are sort of being planted in terms of a political system, or even in higher education, whenever anything is moving through its own cycle and something's dying and something is just wanting to be born again, there will always be people that have the courage to gather in their side communities and to talk about what is coming up in them, what they're feeling and thinking, and having the courage together to challenge presently accepted paradigms that the authority figures think are unfixed and unchanging, or think are fixed and unchanging. So authority figures are sort of saying, these are stuck in, these are like sealed in stones. And these little side think tanks are saying, no, they're not. There's probably some goodness there, but there's also some problems. And we are coming together to create something that is evolutionarily more and broader than what we used to have. We're looking at the problems, but we're creating something better. And so what I'm hoping I'm communicating is that these side communities aren't just some little random one-off from a little therapist that works out of her house. What we are doing and what I'm inviting you to join is consciousness evolution for ourselves and our families, and also our larger communities. I don't think this is even an LDS thing, if I'm going to be totally honest. I've often joked with the people that go to my growth and processing groups. They think they're coming here to talk about, some random topic. I don't know, polygamy or the priesthood. I'm not saying we never talk about those things, but those are not the things we talk about, because what we're talking about is how to awaken our own consciousness and then use that consciousness to become awakened to larger questions in our lives that include not just questions revolving around the church, but all large questions in our lives. And as we take ownership of that kind of higher consciousness, then that becomes actually the gift that keeps on giving. We work through our faith crisis, but then we have the skill set to work through all sorts of other things. So what these side communities, the reason why they're a threat is that they do in fact challenge the unity of the existing church and the authority structure. So of course, as we put our little side communities together, are going to be a threat. We are uncorrelated. We are having radical original thoughts. Keep in mind that from the perspective of those hardliners that are, the most orthodox in the formal leadership, they think that this original order, or what I've been calling thesis, they think that that is always the same. That is the end result. That is it. And so anything other than that is rebellion. Okay. What we're here to say is that it couldn't be that couldn't be less true, that the order or the original idea was in fact valuable for many people. And also every idea has its half-life and its lifespan and is supposed to give way to something better. And that's what we inside communities are doing together. And my hope is that what we're doing is not, as we move into faith crisis, just sort of spinning in disorder, spinning in antithesis, spinning in opposition. And I've mentioned this before, but I feel this is another reason why I think I feel sort of called to do this, is that there are plenty of places to go and talk about all the problems. And I think there's a place for that. And I think it's important. And I think it matters. But I also think there's something else. And I want to create that something else space. I'm not saying the other spaces don't matter and that there isn't a time and a place, but I want to be available for you when you're ready to move out of the anger, the frustration, the betrayal. I'm wanting to be there for you when you're ready to be a part of creating something deeper and richer and more robust, not just in yourself, but I want to help kind of inspire you to see that what we're doing is much larger than just a group of people talking to each other on a Zoom call. I've paused countless times as I'm looking into the eyes of the people in my depth processing groups and thinking to myself, like, it's kind of a weird existential feeling, because an outsider's perspective would just see people, they could be, on a corporate accounting, supposing you're like an accounting company, you could just be having like your little quarterly meeting or whatever. But what we're experiencing in our setting is transformation. It's laying the seeds of change that then we take with us as we close our computer screens, and we integrate those things into how we treat other people, into how we address complicated things, into how we teach our children or model to our children. We actually change generations when we have the courage to change ourselves. And oftentimes this is strengthened and fortified when we do so in communities where we see others and are seen as this change is unfolding. Because, at least for the Mormon faith crisis and faith expansion journey, Mormonism is so deeply entrenched in our identities. It's in our very flesh and bones. It's transgenerational for so many of us. Sort of working this out internally just isn't an option for many of us. There's too much there. It's too messy. It's too complicated. It's too deeply inside of our souls. We don't have anything to compare it against. And so coming together to watch and witness and process in the context of somebody, like in my case, a professional that can kind of facilitate or walk you through how to sort of make sense of it in a way that honors your journey, honors your identity and the value that your Mormonism brings you, but also honors the beautiful and sacred nature of the journey itself. In some cases, definitely be above Mormonism, but also in some cases beyond it, but not in every case. And that's the beautiful thing about this. One of my favorite quotes that is another contender for my next tattoo, although it's too many words, so it's probably never going to happen. But it really speaks to what I'm feeling right now as I talk to you about this bigger picture of what we are doing as we change culture in these side communities. Margaret Mead, who was a kind of a cultural anthropologist, she said this: never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And so what we're doing is significant. What we're doing, if we're having the courage to confront the way we've been raised and to confront the disappointment of our parents, or maybe even a partner or a child, as we are awakening and as we are gathering with a small group of thoughtful, committed people, we are, in fact, sowing the seeds that does change the world. It's what changes culture. It's what could change the church. And it is changing us and those around us as our influence reverberates. And so it is absolutely changing changing the world. So the way I think about this is that I want the Latter-day Struggles platform to be a gathering place for those who want to be part of a growing movement of seekers. If you are a seeker and you really, really want a deeper spiritual relationship, or you want to deepen your spirituality, and you're recognizing, okay, I went so far with Mormonism, but I want more. I don't want to sort of off-ramp off of Mormonism and move into this place of secularism or nihilism. Or if that doesn't satisfy you, you don't want to stay in that place of sort of disorder or opposition, rejection, but you want to move into a higher plane, a higher spirituality. You want to both transcend and include as part of your journey, then this is what I want to offer to you. This is what I'm trying to provide for you. And this kind of clicked for me because, as I mentioned to you a little while ago, I wasn't very interested in starting a new kind of community. I'm really actually pretty happy with my depth healing groups. I love them, actually. They're a lot of work, but they're my people. They're my family. And they're incredible. But also I started thinking about how I'm missing something that I want to be doing, that I need to be doing, that I feel called to do. And this is what I have realized, that while my growth and processing groups are incredible, and I am not wanting to talk you out of them, by the way, we're enrolling for one that actually starts in April. It's the only daytime one in 2026. They're incredible, and yet also they're not quite enough. And this is the reason why I feel like they're not quite enough. For one thing, I've consistently had a struggle since I've been doing this platform. If I could tell you the number of times I've had people request that I put together a group for mixed faith married couples, I mean, countless times. Another consistent request is that mental health workers, therapists that are Latter-day Saint and adjacent have reached out to me and asked if I could put together a group of mental health workers. And that actually sounds incredibly compelling. They actually both do. My struggle is I don't know like where I would put this. I've also had many people request a parenting group, parenting children through faith crisis, or parenting. Let me say that differently. I'm in a faith crisis and I'm a parent. I don't have the luxury to get through that before I pick my parenting back up. And so these are all people that I'm meeting you, and I'm wanting you to meet each other. Something else that I have noticed, again, having done this, I'm going on my 4th year now, so I'm getting a little bit of a body of evidence. As you all know, I do these consultations. I just do a handful a week, and I've started to notice themes. I've had so many consultations of people that need a lot of support because they have an 8-year-old child getting baptized, and they're on a faith journey. Oftentimes they're in a mixed faith or a mixed faith-ish marriage, lots and lots of devout family of origin, and in absolute distress. I do tons of mixed faith marriage consulting. So many of the stories are very, very textbook. And I feel as if I'm not doing all that I could to support these folks by knowing each of them, but not giving you a chance to know each other. I've also met many, I've been acquainted with many situations because of Mormonism and certainly the Western Christian gendered ideal of the stay-at-home mom and the working dad. I've worked with so many women in a faith journey who are very, very dependent on their husbands because all those years ago, they gave up their own education and they gave up their ability to be independent if it ever was, if that was ever something that was necessary. And so their faith journey is one of a lot of loneliness and fear. I've also run across parents wanting more support around how to raise teenagers using something other than the strength of the youth manual, as they may want to stay connected to the LDS Church, but they need a broader, wider, more expansive view of parenting around issues of things like sexuality and how to have a different relationship with substances, word of wisdom type things. They know that they don't want to have sort of the black and white paradigm of yesteryear, but they don't know where to go next. Another one that is huge that I have talked to so many people about is, and this has been me, I mean, not that I talked to myself, I mean, I guess I did, but what about that parent who has a kid headed to the temple? This can be for an endowment experience, headed out for a mission, or this can be a child getting married in the temple. You see, what I'm noticing is that for so many of us, if you're attracted to the Latter-day Struggles platform, I don't find it a coincidence that you were probably one of the more devout Latter-day Saints, and your devotion led you to your faith crisis, because your devotion to the church comes from a place of a deep desire to know God. And in the most perverse, twists, you fell upon your faith crisis because of your devotion to know God. What you didn't know was that your devotion to the LDS Church was the catapult to your deeper devotion to God. And so you come here because you were the most committed, and you're the most disoriented also, because your devotion has led you into a deepening understanding of yourself, of the power within you, a deepening understanding of your potential to ask questions and to be more complex thinking, to bring your authority back home instead of outsourcing it. And yet at the same time, you're the very same person who also very diligently taught those children, many of whom are now going to the temple, which now you don't know how to handle. And so it has occurred to me as I think about the countless people that I have worked with through consulting, through requests for me to do these special groups that I just don't have time for, that I can create a side community where we can meet, where I can introduce you to each other, where we can come together as this place of not only spiritual healing, but also we can come together and we can become sort of this leading edge of consciousness and awakening. And you can find your people, and we can together find answers to what we're experiencing. You can recognize that there are others in your very same or very similar places of growth and development, where you don't have to be alone. My idea is that I want us to be able to come together and have a place to talk about our growth and expansion journeys. Formally, we will be talking about current events and what is dropping on the podcast. However, I absolutely, and you know this if you're a group member, I do love me a good rabbit trail, and I am absolutely wanting to have this also be an organic place where we can come together and we can have question and answer sessions, where we can come together and talk about what's going on in your lives. Something else that I want to provide to you as I lead this new side community is we're up to over 400 episodes, and there are many of you who have approached me with a question, and by golly, we've already done, if not an episode, sometimes an entire series. And this is the place. Oh, that's so funny. I just did like a Brigham Young thing. This is the place. Sorry, I digress. This is going to regroup here. These side communities will be the place where we can come together and I can direct you in directions that will give you direction and guidance. And then you can come back and we can talk about those things. And we can look at current things. We can look at current episodes. We can look at current issues. We can look at past episodes. We can see what your needs are. And we can meet those needs organically. I think that might be why I feel called to do the live fellowship, because I want it to be organic. I want it to be somewhere where you can come and feel seen, but also feel that you are not only awakening to yourself, which is a plenty good and worthy goal, but that you were part of something profound and important in the evolution of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in fact, I think it's even bigger than that. That consciousness is awakening in our world, and we are a part of that. Of course we are. Why wouldn't we be? It's happening in all faiths and in no faith at all. Human beings are awakening because that's the order of the universe, that we are growing up as a human race. And so we are becoming more and more aware of our divinity. And it is happening right here. And we can hasten that if we come together and support one another and recognize how big this really is. So something special about that kind of helps me in my like more quivery, insecure moments is that I really don't worry that much about what I'm doing not working. If I'm going to be totally honest, I worried a little bit. I did. I worried a little bit that if and when they kicked us out, and I know that's kind of a dramatic rendering of it, but it, I know we opted out because, let's be totally honest, they were going to kick us out. That was the most worry I've ever had, that I was on a fool's errand. But if I'm going to be totally honest, in my days where I wasn't drowning in fear, I've always known that what I was doing was the work of God, that this is the right thing. And the reason why I knew that is because from the very, very beginning, I knew this wasn't about Valerie Hamaker at all. This could just as easily been anybody else. This is about someone being a mouthpiece, being an instrument to help this community come to know who they truly are. And so it's never even crossed my mind that ultimately in the big picture that this isn't going to work, because this is actually God's work. God wants each and every one of us, I believe. Well, let me rephrase that to sort of align with how I'm actually experiencing God. The reason why I think this is going to work is because I believe that we each are emanations of God in human form. And so, of course, when we come together and witness to one another what we are realizing about our own and one another's divinity, how can that not work? It's going to work. And when we enter into a Mormon flavored faith crisis, we are already very much primed for a deepening journey, because quite frankly, we're already on the deepening journey if we're in a faith crisis. And so just coming together is giving us an opportunity to sort of hasten the unfolding awakening that we're having already. And in some ways, it's actually providing an environment of healing, whereas in early faith crisis, isolation and silence and shame is not an environment for healing. So I guess the point I'm getting at is I'm not really worried that this live fellowship isn't going to go well. But I will say this, these things start small. Before 2 weeks ago, you didn't even know this existed, because before about a month ago, I didn't even know this existed. And my team can corroborate that. They're like, what are you talking about? So I guess what I'm trying to say here is this. This is going to start small. And I'm okay with that. As a matter of fact, I kind of love that idea, because I want those of you who choose to jump in to be kind of like my founding people. We have chosen to do this in waves of enrollment so that there isn't a sense of sort of jump on, jump off chaos. The first wave of enrollment will end the first day of the actual live fellowship itself, meaning that the first one that we've already done one, which was sort of my open house. This first one for those who choose to become participants in the live fellowship. That one is forthcoming, and that's March 9th at noon. I'm looking inside my heart. You don't know this, but I'm telling you. I'm like, I should have written that down. I'm pretty sure that's true, though. March 9th, it's a Monday at noon Pacific. So if you choose to be part of this first sort of founding group, you get to help me shape this thing. Also, incidentally, because these things start small, we'll get more attention from each other. I will facilitate more coaching. I will I will certainly be asking for your feedback. Something else that I just can't be more excited about is my hope is that some of you will show up and this is new. This whole thing is new. The faith crisis is new. And some of you will show up who have taken every single offering that I've ever put out there, and we will become this amazing synergy of mentors and helpers and friends and companions on this journey. And so I guess what I'm trying to say in conclusion is that wherever you are on your faith journey, if you ever thought, how would I behave if I lived in an era where, there was a movement happening? What would I do? Would I want to be a part of it? Would I want to be a part of that leading edge of development? And I'm here to say, I actually kind of think this is a movement right now. We are living in an era of extreme disruption and also extreme enlightenment. And that is not a coincidence that they're both happening at the same time. And so if you think that what I'm saying makes sense to you and you want to be a part of the leading edge of growth and development as a heritage or a convert of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you want to sort of be one of those people that introduces some of these ideas, some ways of thinking, if you want to be a part of something that is interested in reforming our own home institution towards greater and greater degrees of equality and love and integrity, that's what we, in our little group of people, are forming together. And then we close our computers and go out into the world and show up that way. And I feel very strongly that as we do this and as this reverberates and as this grows, that we will be making a great deal of difference. It may not be evident in our lifetimes. I'm actually okay with that. I've surrendered that a long time ago. That all just felt like ego to me to see like what happened while I could sort of witness it. I don't care about that. But I do want to be somebody who plants that seed and grows that tree that I will never sit under. I do care about that. It's kind of my labor of love. And if you're somebody who wants to plant some seeds with me, the cool part about this is that we may never see the outcome, but we will have the felt experience of joining one another in something that is profoundly meaningful in and of itself. Okay, last thing I'm going to do, I promise. This is it. I want to, gosh, I almost said sing. I definitely am not going to sing you a song. I am going to read the words to a song, and I want to invite you to listen to it. I'm going to do my very best to see if my team can put this song on a story, although I understand that's kind of tricky because these come with, specific podcast providers, you have to sort of be a part of their platform or whatever. But in whatever way you can, as you turn this podcast off, I want you to jump onto whatever your provider is and listen to the following song. It's called We Shall Be Known. It's by the band or the individual Mamuse, Mamuse, maybe. And these are the words. It's very short. Incidentally, before I tell you, the words to the song came to her in a dream, and they were so clear to her that she was sure that she had heard this somewhere and that her unconscious was just remembering it. Turns out she had never heard it. It had never been written. it sort of came to her in almost like a dream, sort of a channeling experience. And I believe this to my core because as I've listened to this song countless times, this feels thematic of exactly what I'm trying to do here in on the Latter-day Struggles platform. I'm trying to gather seekers who want to be a part of a greater change, a change that's even greater than what we probably can understand. So the song's words are these: we shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. The reason why this is meaningful to me is because, well, there's so many things. I could spend another hour talking about this, but I won't. The only thing I will say is, in this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love means everything to me in reference to why this has come to matter to me, meaning that, like, why am I doing this? And now what I've sort of shared with you today is why I'm doing it. This is much bigger than a little private practice therapist putting together a little group. If that's all it was, I really wouldn't be doing it. I have plenty of other things to do, but I care about what I see as something much bigger going on. And by definition, the great turning has been defined as a fundamental, ongoing, and essential transition in our world away from patriarchy, away from industrial capitalism, away from these rigid black and white early development kind of structures. This great turning is about awakening to social injustice. It's about awakening to the feminine energy that this world desperately needs. And that right there, my friends, is what we are doing in the work that we individually are awakening to, is we are part of a much larger movement than anything that is Mormon in nature. What we are a part of is something that is profoundly human in nature. And we happen to live in a time where this evolution is happening. Something is awakening right now in human beings, Mormon and otherwise. And what we're doing is we're looking at how we can be a part of this in the context of our roots from Mormonism. But we are actually, much more significantly, we are awakening to who we are as evolving divine beings. And that's what we will come together and talk about. And that's what we will bring into the world. And that's how we will become leaders in this great turning from the context of our LDS origins. If this is something that resonates with you, then I really hope that you're one of my founding people. There will be more enrollment periods. I am going to sort of take that, play that by ear. But if you want to jump in and be a part of this, the first one is March 9th at 12 o'clock Pacific. If you hear this down the road in months or years from now, I sure hope this is still going on. But if it's not, I hope you enjoy the podcast and whatever it is that I am still offering. Now, if this is something that you want to participate in and you're thinking about the money, I want to submit to you that I am doing everything that I possibly can to be able to hold the tension of two things. The number one is that this is my profession, and this is how I help provide for my family. But also, I really, really want to get to a place where no one is denied access and opportunity to what I offer. For that reason, if you are someone who maybe this doesn't feel like it's for you, but you want to channel your charitable contributions towards this vision of what I do, then I would ask you to reach out to admin@latterdaystruggles.com, and they will get you connected to the Faith Journey Foundation so that you can donate your charitable donations so that other people can participate in this or other of the offerings that I have. So I invite you, if you are somebody on the side of giving, or if you are somebody that needs a little bit of assistance, to reach out and let us know that as well. We really want to be able to offer these things to anyone who needs them. The 501c3 is new, and so we're not quite there yet, but the more charitable donations that come our way, the more we will be able to have almost something like an endowment, is how I sort of see this, where we continue to have enough to be able to provide for all of the needs of people that need what we have to offer. So, okay, I made that in 1 hour and 15 seconds. That is not too bad. Thank you so much for being a part of my ongoing unfolding spiritual journey. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of your day, and for listening to how I am experiencing my own unfolding of my own faith journey, and how I can be a part of yours. And I do feel profoundly honored that you are allowing me to be a part of this very, very sacred space in your life. So thanks for being with me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. If this podcast has supported your faith journey, we invite you to explore the many ways you can continue your healing and growth with us. On our website, you'll find support and processing groups, marriage and parenting courses, and free resources to support where you are in your faith journey. You can also join Valerie in the live fellowship gatherings throughout the year, where we connect, process the podcast, and build meaningful friendships with others on similar paths. If cost has ever been a barrier, we offer podcast scholarships funded by listener donations. To explore all of these offerings, visit the link in today's show notes or go to latterdaystruggles.com. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you, leaving a 5-star review is one of the most powerful ways to help others find this work. Latter-day Struggles is proud to be part of the Dialogue Podcast Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.